Hello, listeners. Welcome to Brief Encounters. I'm your host, Riya Gupta from National Law University, Jodhpur, and it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Samar Jha as today's distinguished guest. He is a dual qualified attorney with a strong foundation in law and public administration. He earned his BA LLB honors from NALSAR University of Hyderabad, followed by a Master of Law in Banking, Corporate, Finance, and Securities Law from the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School. He further honed his expertise with a Master of Public Administration from the Fels Institute of Government at the University of Pennsylvania. With extensive experience in government affairs and legislative strategy, he has played pivotal roles in various organizations, including his current position as Government Affairs Director at AARP, American Association of Retired Persons. His career journey spans key positions at prominent law firm and public sector roles, where he has been instrumental in shaping public policy, legislative negotiation, and advocacy. We look forward to an enlightening discussion with Sir. Hello, sir. Welcome to Brief Encounters.
Thank you, Ria. Thank you so much.
So let's start from the very beginning. Can you share us what initially inspired you to pursue a law degree at the undergrad level?
It's a great question because, I'm the first, at that time, I was the first lawyer in my family. Most of my family members from my mom on my dad's side were like either doctors, engineers. Law was not even, they were not even considering law as a career. But I knew that I did not want to be a doctor. I did not want to be an engineer, right? So I decided that, and I was always very much interested in history and, political science. And even though, 11th and 12th grade, I did science, but I was very much interested in those subjects. And at that point of time, I decided that I think I was in 11th grade and I sat down my parents one day. I still remember it was raining outside, and, it was that scenario that I told my parents, hey, listen, I can't do engineering. It's not my cup of tea. I want to do something different, and I want to do, sit for the law school entrance exams. Initially, there was some sort of skeptical because, why not engineering? Why not, go to the medical field? But then they realize, yeah, if you're good at it and if you do, well in those entrance exams, you may end up in a good law school. Fortunately, things worked out, and I was in NALSAR. So.
Wow. That's amazing to hear. So, and then what influenced your decision to pivot to public administration in the later part of your academic journey?
So it was a journey because as you may have seen my profile, I used to be a corporate lawyer, right?
Right.
And when I did my LLM, thinking that I'll get back to law firms, right? I knew that I was never happy working in a law firm. It was not my cup of tea, I would say. But my then girlfriend, now wife,
Wow.
she is the one who suggested that you look miserable every time you talk about your law firm life. Why don't you do something else?
Right.
And then she was the one who suggested that there is a public policy fellowship in the city of Philadelphia and the city council. Apply for that as a graduate public policy fellow. And that is where I applied.
Mm-hmm.
And once I was a public policy fellow, I fell in love with the work. And I was not getting paid at all. It was like a $12 an hour thing. Imagine working in a law firm, getting that much, a decent salary, and then suddenly you're getting $12 an hour. But then I took a chance, and then I was like, let's try this. And I fell in love with the public policy work, all the kind of research and, legislation review strategy that we were doing. And since then, I started pursuing that kind of career. And while I was doing that, I realized that I think it will be more beneficial to do an MPA, Master in Public Administration. I was thinking either an MBA or MPA, but I knew that I don't want to go to the corporate sector. MBA does not make sense. And the MBA, and I had already studied in University of Pennsylvania. I wanted to continue my education there, and the Fels Institute of Government, it's really, really good. So applied for that. I did an executive course. So while I was working, I was never for 2 years.
Wow. That's amazing. And may I ask why University of Pennsylvania specifically?
For LLM or for MPA?
The LLM program.
LLM. It had a good, again, I was, at that point of time, I was still considering a corporate law career, right? It had a good corporate law background, good courses, good professors, had a strong, alliance towards the corporate law culture. And that's why I had pursued that. And, couple of things also. Philadelphia is much cheaper than New York. That all.
Understand. Okay,
That's what I love this. I love the city. It's more affordable than New York. That also makes sense. And the location is amazing to be in Philly because you are close to DC, close to New York, and apart from the Philly job market and all that stuff. So you are in the East Coast. It's still a great place to be at.
Right.
So
So, well, just a little personal anecdote. I lived and grew up in Dubai throughout my entire life. And then I wrote CLAT and I came to college in NLU Jodhpur. And now, although I did like a CBSE education in both places, I did feel like a difference when I came to India from my Dubai education. So, what according to you, were the key differences between legal education in India and in the US?
I think the emphasis on the Socratic method in
Mm-hmm.
law school, especially in US, is big. When I say Socratic method, that means basically a method in which the students involved in the teaching,
Exactly.
where the professors tell you and they can call on you to discuss things. It's funny. I still remember we were assigned seats in at Penn.
Oh,
We were assigned seats for the entire semester. The professor knew exactly where you were sitting. Yeah,
my
the
God.
professor had chart
Seating chart.
on
Yeah.
their table saying this is the place, the person's name, and where you're sitting. So I remember there were professors who will look at the chart and say, "Hey, oh, Mr. Jha, can you tell me this?" I'm like, "Oh God,
Mhm.
be ready with that stuff." So those are the things, and we had that in NALSAR also. A few professors did that. Professor Amita Dhanda was a legend in NALSA, an iconic professor there. She used to do that. She used to call on you in
Scary.
class.
That's scary.
So we were used to that. There were professors who used to do that, but I don't know what's happening now. I'm pretty sure the professors now may be doing that more often.
Mhm.
But that's one thing that is a huge difference in that. And the way of teaching at Penn was that, and also you were sitting beside people who are really good. All right. And in NALSA also, I'm not saying that in NALSA also you thought you were really good, but then you're sitting beside a person who's equally or better than you, right? Similar to that in Penn also they were there, but there were students who were already had experience in the workforce.
Mhm.
The difference there in NALSA is that you straight away from high school or your 12th grade, you are joining 5 years of law, right? Whereas most of the JD students or LLM students have already finished their 4 years of education, undergraduate, have worked maybe two, three, four, or more than that, and then join law school. So there were people who already experienced a lot in the workforce. I in my LLM class, you had judges from different countries who were my classmates.
Oh, wow.
I had a friend who was a judge in Egypt, and I had another JD classmate who was a former Marine in U.S. Marine. So you see that the entire class comprised of people who have had different work experience and massive. Being a workforce gives you a lot of experience while studying also, which NALSA and Jodhpur for example, will not have that because you haven't had that experience in the workforce.
Right.
Internship does not count, right? Internship will not count. I'm talking about proper
No
workforce.
way connected to it. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the big difference also.
Right. And if I may ask, is the rote learning system that still continues to persist in college as well as in CBSE when we had to mug up for things and then write it in the exam? Is it a similar kind of system in the US as well, or do you have a more
No, you
practical
need to
curriculum?
understand the concepts. That's a great question. You need to understand the concepts. And you don't have to, there's no concept about learning and remembering the case law, the name of the case.
Oh,
Whereas in US, you
yeah.
remember, I still remember Keishananda Bharati case, and that's the only one I remember right now. But they were like, you need to remember the
Each and
the
every
two
case.
parties in the
Yeah.
case, and then put that in your answer. There is no concept such as in the US when you answer these questions. You you need to understand the legal concept and
Mhm.
apply the concept in your answer.
Right.
That is the most important aspect of that learning. Not a lot of mugging up, but definitely understanding how the law works. And that also goes into the fact when you're doing a bar exam. Your
Mm-hmm.
bar exam, when you take whichever bar exam you take, I took the New York bar, and that's how they in the New York bar you have multiple choice questions also, but there's one section 3 hours where you have to answer essay questions where you have to apply your legal concept. You need to understand the law and then apply the law.
Right.
That's what.
I think that's
Whereas
quite a practical
in India, it was the
application.
emphasis on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Practical application. And that's why I also like the Fels Institute of Government
Mm-hmm.
when I did my MPA. It relies on practical practical education. Most of my professors at Fels were all people who have working in the in city government, non-profits or tech companies or even big companies and teaching us. So
Right.
huge difference. Huge difference.
Yeah. I think that pushes me towards maybe choosing US as my path as well.
I'm not sure about how UK. I'm pretty sure Oxford, Cambridge, and other similar ones also have that kind of. But then I haven't studied in UK, so I don't know that. But I can tell you this is how US law schools work.
And you mentioned that most of your classmates had all of this great experience. They were judges from all over the country. So the competition must have been really, really high in the particular class. Does that
Yeah,
ever count as, because I know in college it does. I mean, that obviously stands considering they're one of the top ranked colleges in India. So the competition still runs. But in an LM program where everyone has so much experience, did that ever affect you in college?
one thing I can tell you, the good thing about Indian education is we are prepared for competition, right?
Very true.
You are
Very,
studying in Jodhpur. You are already prepared for competition because you came competing against some really good students.
that is true.
Okay. So that is one thing that India prepares you is to compete, especially in the education field. And that way, yes, I obviously had really good people who have like full experience as my classmates, both
Right.
JD and LLM students. But I was not intimidated by them because competition is there. I'm used to that being from India, and because my NALSAR classmates, all of them I see like doing really well in their career, or partners in law firms, senior advocates, and they're really good. So I know that I was of a cohort in who are is pretty good. And similarly, when you go to law, a law school in US, you will be in a cohort which will be also very competitive. But so yeah, I was prepared on that. But you're right, there's competition again. If you go to any good university around the world, you will have the same level of competition. Everyone wants to do well.
Mhm.
Everyone also at that age, you are very mature enough, say thinking what you need to do in life, and you will do that stuff.
Mhm.
So that's a difference also.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. And UPenn, I mean, University of Pennsylvania, if I'm not wrong, it's an Ivy League college as well.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
that's amazing to even get into. So, for students like us, is there any way we can leverage, Indian law background, experiences, or basically, I'm asking about the application process. What can we do to make ourselves stand out from the thousands and thousands of applications that they receive every year?
That's a good question. While in law school, I would suggest that I always tell people that, hey, you can pivot in your career at any point of time, right? I did not know I wanted to do. When I entered law school, I thought I'll change the world. Clearly, that didn't happen. But I would graduate from NALSA. But yes, if you are interested in a specific field of law, if you know that that's what you want to do, you can do your internships accordingly. And then, after you graduate from law school, being from Jodhpur, you'll have a lot of different choices. It's a good school. When you graduate, you will have different choices. Choose, I mean, make your choice, very wisely in terms of what career you want to be at. If you want to apply for Ivy Leagues and other schools which are also other than Ivy League, there are good schools, also law schools in the US. It will be good to have some work experience to apply for LLM. They do look at that. Unfortunately, grades also matter.
Yeah, you have to maintain.
I should have done better on that work experience definitely, and then choose the law schools what you want to do. And law, I did it because again corporate law was still my thing, and there are law schools who have different concentrations. For example, Stanford Law, Tech, here on the West Coast in California. Tech Law is then Stanford, obviously the name itself goes for that. Yale Law is big on research, big on people who want to have the scholarly aspect of law. You know, so I'm just also minimizing the knowledge that I have, but
Right.
I'm pretty sure that if you do research and what concentration different law schools have, you'll find more about it. But internships and then experience and also mooting, debating, those are big on
Okay.
that. So those are something that you should definitely look at.
Mm-hmm.
And extracurriculars also matter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have done research articles on that in different journals, that plays a big role. Even after you have done with when you're in the workforce, you probably may not have a lot of time to do a lot of things. But if you can do some, I wouldn't say side gig, like you're doing the podcasting. I think it's a big thing, right? It's a great, I wouldn't say a side gig, but something that you can master it. You already, as I said, you're doing a great job. So that also helps. So, there are different ways you can bolster your application for.
And if I may ask, an SOP is extremely important when it comes to this application process. When I was in high school, I was also applying abroad to UK and the US, and we had to write SOPs for both programs. There was a difference when it comes to UK and US. I think UK is they're more focused, they're very tunnel vision. They just want you to explain why that particular college, why do you want to go there, simple as that. I like how the US has a slightly more personal touch in your SOPs when you're applying there. So could you explain what your SOP process was like? What do you think made you stand out to? Because UPenn has a very low acceptance rate. Getting accepted there is a huge thing.
Yeah, it's a great question because I did not apply for UK colleges as far as I remember.
Okay.
I don't know the process. I'm glad you mentioned that or why you applying for UK and but US, yeah, they do have a personal touch when their questions are. They want to know your story. Storytelling aspect is really important. When I say storytelling, obviously you don't have to go in different tangent, but connected to the question. But also talking about how your career trajectory has been and why you want to do this specifically, right? In this course, what do you want to do? That is really important, the SOP. You don't have to, butter them saying, oh, this is such a great law school. They know that. I mean, you're going to apply to Penn, Harvard, or Yale. You don't have to tell them that you're a great law school. They know that. It's not something that what you also have to say how you're going to contribute to that, to the cohort, being part of your other classmates, how you're going to be part of that. How you going to contribute to the law school, in what way? And so I think those are really important on that. A lot of people don't have a way. Sometimes when they apply for multiple law schools, they have one set of SOP and just change it a little bit. I wouldn't do that because for that you take out time to customize it for that specific application. I've seen that. I've seen a lot of people do that, and you may be successful. I'm not saying you may not, but I think it's always good to customize, especially for the law schools you're really, really going for. So,
right. Understandable. I'll keep that in mind, definitely. So when you got into UPenn, was that your first time moving abroad?
Moving abroad, yes. I've been to outside.
Right.
Yeah, living. That was my first time.
Okay.
And that was my first time in US also. So that was a good experience. It's a lot of people don't realize, especially in US, that how people coming from abroad, they're actually uprooting their life and moving.
They are.
It's not people. It's not an easy thing to uproot your life that you have in a comfortable life that you have, and then you're moving somewhere else, totally different country and different culture, different that you may not have experienced before. And it was cultural shift. Yes, the good thing is that I know the language. English is,
of course,
that's not a big. Yeah, that is helpful. But definitely a huge cultural shift in terms of how we live in India and US. There was massive and funny incidents also in terms of cultural differences.
Please do tell. I mean, I would love to hear of you.
Now it's been like 10 years in this country, but I remember when I first moved to US, there's one, when I think of it, it's very funny. So in US, when people meet you, they'll say, hi, how are you? Right. After that, all your reply typically is good. Hi, how are you? Good. How about you? Basically.
Right.
So in India, it's a question. Like if I am meeting, hi, how are you? We will start having a conversation. That's like a big conversation. This is what happened. That happened. Whereas in US, it's like meeting each, hi, how are you? And then go past. That's it. I didn't know that. I still remember my public policy fellowship happening in Philadelphia City Council. And City Council, if you ever go to the Philadelphia City Council, massive corridors, long corridors, like literally 3 or 4 blocks is that big. And people during lunchtime, they actually do their lunch walk inside. I remember I was walking and there was this person who is the head of housing, in City Council, and his name is Herb Wetzel. I remember walking
past. And I always used to say, hi, how are you? And he will ask me, hi, how are you? And I thought he was asking me to have a conversation. I used to stop there, and he'll just go past me asking. That's really rude. But then I realized, like, okay, that's how people greet. So that's one thing. The other incident happened when I started dating my wife. In India, when you go to a restaurant, the moment the person comes, the server comes, you will ask them, and they'll ask you what do you want, and you start rambling. This is what I want.
Yeah.
In US, it's a more whereas in India it's very transactional. When you come there, person asks you what you want, and whereas in US they'll come there, hi, how are you? The server will start having a conversation. How is it going? And this was first, a second, a third date. We're having a meal, and the server comes, and the person comes without me even saying hi, how are you to that person. I just said, this is what I want. My wife, my then girlfriend, she's looking at me saying, this guy is rude. Then when the server went away, and she said, like, you didn't even say hi to that person. Like, I didn't realize it's not. I mean, in India we typically don't do that.
Right.
A greeting. So then those are like small cultural differences. Funny now, I'm used to it now, but they're funny ones.
Yeah, I think those are things that people don't talk about. I mean, there's of course the massive cultural shift, that the obvious ones, obviously, but then there's these small anecdotes that make things really funny.
It's funny. Obviously, and now I know. Now I'm so used to these. Like, people, when the server comes, hi, how are you? That entire conversation happens. But if I go back and think about these, these are small cultural differences people don't talk about. People talk about big ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Big, small, minute ones which are like funny in nature, and then it's fun.
So moving back to the LLM, what do you think? What were your key takeaways from the program in its whole?
Understanding the US law, US legal system, it was important, how it works. One of the best things I did at Penn Law was I worked at the law school clinic, worked at the Detkin Intellectual Property Clinic. Right. I loved the property subject, so I wanted to do that. So the professor who is the head of that clinic is a professor and obviously a lawyer. Her name is Professor Cynthia Dahl.
Okay.
By far the best professor I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
NALSAR, Penn Law, or Fels, but that professor is by far the best. And that law school clinic was really important because we work with clients. We are advising clients. So just gave you an idea of how US client. Again, I've done some big transactions while in law firms, so I've done client work. But again, the cultural differences comes up when you're dealing with clients in US. So it was important to do that. Most of my clients in the law school clinic were nonprofits, but it was great to understand and how lawyer and client relationship works there. And obviously, US legal system is important. So those things I really, really enjoyed.
Right. All right. Your current role at AARP, am I getting it right? Is it ARP or AARP? How do we call it?
AARP.
AARP. Okay. All right. So it involves extensive legislative negotiation, advocacy, etc. How has your legal education, both India, abroad, and training, how has it contributed to the success in this present role?
It's a big role that the legal training plays for me. And again, I'm not talking about non-lawyers. I'm sure their education plays a huge role if they're working in the position I'm at. But from my perspective, my legal training plays a big role because just the way when I was used to work in law firm, when you're negotiating a contract, you will negotiate a legislation, right? Or drafting of legislation or drafting of contracts. Legal training provides you to understand. When I review legislation, for example, as a lawyer, when I review it, it's easy for me. I can do it really easily, but I think I do a decent job when I review a legislation. Also, while drafting legislation, having the legal training helps me with the, we have studied statute of interpretation in law school, right?
Yeah.
To interpret a statute, how it means, what are the words that you include will change the meaning on that specific clause. So those things are really important. And that's what my work is, right? Looking at legislation, reviewing it and seeing, okay, if I include these words, it will be good for our organization.
Right.
So those things play a huge role. And negotiation is also important. Like, it's all about give and take. Just like in contractual negotiation, it's same here in legislative. There are different stakeholders. That's the only thing. Usually in a typical contractual thing in corporate law, it's you are against one other stakeholder in front of you. But in my case, there are different stakeholders. It may be the government, maybe other non-profits, or others, organization, profit or non-profit, and then us. So we all need to work together and negotiate. So that the legal training plays a huge role, at least for me, for sure.
Right. Okay. So you were talking about your journey from corporate to now in public policy and all of that. And like you've mentioned, your wife played a major role in helping you choose between what it is that you loved. What kind of an advice, or for students who are interested in the intersection of law and advocacy, what advice would you give them for building like a strong foundation and navigating career choices in that particular intersection?
I pivoted my career a little later in life, but if you are already interested in public policy, and when I was in law school at that point of time, following the herd was more of the norm. Like most of law school classmates are going for different law firms. I joined a law firm. At that point of time, public policy was not that big.
Right.
Even the LLM fellowship, for example, right? It started in 2010. I graduated in 2008. There is no concept of legislative work. But now there is a lot of students who want to get into advocacy or policy work. So they already know exactly what they want to do. So if you are interested, and it's a great career choice. If you are interested, do your internships accordingly. There are now think tanks in India. One that comes to mind is Vidhi. My classmate Alok Prasanna was one of the founders of that. So he is, I know that organization is great when it comes to public policy and think tank work. So you should cater your internships accordingly, and think about, instead of LLM, for example, do an MPA. Think about we already have the undergraduate degree of, we have a legal training. Think about MPA or some other sort of public policy course if they want to do it. Also, LLM, you can do it. You can still do it and concentrate on policy, like Fletcher's Tufts University, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, has a policy aspect to it. Within any LLM course, also you can study for legislative policy, also law in American law schools. So, if you already know that you like that area of issue area, then do that. And within the policy issue area itself, the different policy issue areas. For example, I do housing work, but there are people who are doing tech policy. People are doing securities and corporate law policy work also. So there are different issue areas also you may want to work. Then within, for example, a team I'm at, it works on livable communities. We have my colleagues work, apart me working on housing, the other colleague works on transportation, utilities, broadband, and high-speed internet. Those are all big issues that come up. So there's lots of issue areas that you can actually concentrate on. Education policy is one big issue in US also, and I'm pretty sure in India also it's a big issue. I know, having a conversation with my friend Alok from Vidhi, he had mentioned that the concept of livable communities is also big in India.
Yeah.
So there's enough. I know lots of people, when they think about policy, first thing they think about in India is tech policy, which is understandable because tech policy is big in India. But there are other issues within policy. There's so much more to talk about. Human rights is one. So there's enough to learn about, and if you're interested in it, just cater your internships. And if you want to do graduate courses in US or UK also has some. I think Oxford has a good public policy school, Blackwick School of Public Policy, I think. So there's enough traction happening in terms of policy where in India also you can work on.
All right. So you have worked with a wide range of stakeholders, including government, academia, nonprofits, private sectors. You've mentioned all of that. What are some key skills that you think that future students who want to pursue public policy, what skills should they have to navigate in these diverse fields?
In relation to public policy and advocacy, I think one of the skills, if you're a lawyer, if you have the legal training, your reviewing skills, drafting skills should be good. Reviewing skills of how you review a legislation, and how you can sum up a legislation in a very simple way. A lot of times, as lawyers, we are so knee deep into legalese that we use terms which only lawyers can understand sometimes. But when you're working in public policy and advocacy, a lot of times you are dealing with people who are non-lawyers. So you need to explain them in very simple languages. Like, what does the legislation do? What's the basics of the legislation? To breaking down that legislative language into a very simple, non-legalese language is very important. That skill needs to be learned. It's very. And as I said, when we are lawyers, we just sometimes wrap up our head in a language in a way that other people, only lawyers can understand. But we need to unwrap that and make it easier for who you're. That's where the stakeholder negotiation helps, right? The understanding how the legislation works and explaining it. This is what exactly the legislation does, and this is how it can be improved. So that is a really important skill to have. The other one is negotiation, understanding how when's a good time to give and take. There's a negotiation happening. Good stakeholder auditing, understanding who are your supporters, who are the people you need to convince, who are the people who are opposing a specific one. So understanding the entire layout. Right. It's called stakeholder auditing. People who work in public policy and advocacy, they need to do that stakeholder auditing to understand who are the people who are involved in that specific issue and how we need to navigate and negotiate with them from our perspective. So those are the things that it's important to learn. You also learn when you are part of the workforce. In your law school or in your policy school, you will be taught these things, but sometimes that through experience also you learn a lot.
Right.
And that's one thing I liked about the Fels Institute of Government, was it's a very practical education that was happening there, because most of the professors are in the workforce, working in that issue area or in policy field, and they should tell us this is how it works, and so that practical education is really important, and that's why I love Fels Institute.
Right. And as you've mentioned before, public policy in India, the first thing that comes into the head is tech, but there's so much beyond that. What, according to you, do you think are some of the emerging trends when it comes to public policy and legislative strategy that the legal profession should be aware of before they enter into this field or continue with the field?
Yeah, so obviously, as I mentioned, tech policy is one back in India, right? I think a lot is happening in the housing policy, real estate, these big things, because there's so much development happening in India. You need to understand, especially what kind of housing policies you want to be part of. There's a strong real estate lobby. Then also housing advocates to make sure a lot of people who are not housed, they need housing. For that matter, there's one. Education policy is big, in relation to primary education to, college education and beyond. So understand there's a proper policy in relation to education policies that are coming out at the state, local and state level or in the federal level. So those are big. And human rights is always an issue in different countries, not only India, but that is something that is their constitutional rights. People who want to defend the constitution, that's really, really important. So those I would say things that will definitely come up. There's on the corporate side of it, you also, while you work on as a corporate lawyer, you also need to understand there's a lot of changes happening in the law, right? So the corporate law policy that's in the country, even that is a big one to work on. Transportation, I think it's big in India. I know that Uber has a big public policy team in India. I know that. So even though it's technically a tech company, but they work on transportation policies, right? So that aspect is really important. Energy is one big. I'm 100% sure that there'll be a time when right now they have the national form of, whatever energy policies you have in wind, solar. There are other things that are being worked on in India. I'm pretty sure that's also a big one too.
That is quite amazing.
So I'm sure I'm missing a lot of other things, but that is definitely even entertainment policy, intellectual property. It's a big thing, patent, especially when it comes to pharmacy. Oh, I forgot. Pharma industry is big. So healthcare. How can I even forget? Healthcare is the biggest issue that you can work on. So that's also big.
Of course, those are the big, huge industries which they are growing. All right, moving on to our last few questions for this podcast. Based on your experience, what advice would you like to give to students who are currently pursuing an LLM or want to pursue an LLM?
I would first of all suggest that choose the law school wisely, where you want to study. If you're already in a law school, a lot of times Indian students do have a tough time, and being very honest, do have a tough time finding a job. And there's a reason for that. You will see when you're LLM student, your classmates who are from Latin America or certain other countries, they will find jobs in US. It's because they have a corresponding law firm in their country. Because foreign law firms have set up office in their country.
Yeah, that's true.
In India, it's not the case, where US or UK law firms have not set up, there are no corresponding offices in India. So that's why they cannot say, okay, work for us in the New York office and then maybe someday move to the India office. There's no chance. That's not happening. So that's why there is issues with students finding a job in US, and also visa issues and all that stuff happens. So I always suggest students to just widen your job search. Not only concentrate on corporate law. I know a lot of students want to join the big law firms and corporate law jobs. But if you want to navigate your job search, just widen the search and look at policy jobs. Look at non-profits who are looking for good lawyers to also work for them. I would, for example, if you're in US, you may be taking the New York bar exam. It's a good thing to take, good credential to have. If you can study and pass the bar, that's great. But definitely widen your search. There are different ways you can do that. There are different job search websites. Indeed.com is one, which is massive. LinkedIn is one, but there are other ones which have, for non-profit, there's a website called idealist.org. I always tell them, just search for it. There are lots of fellowships happening, lots of policy fellowship, lots of fellowships in universities, but they are looking for students to apply for. So all in all, I would say widen your job search. Don't be restricted to just, okay, law firm job is the only one I'll be looking at in New York or, in California or whichever part of the country you want to be at. But if you can just widen your search, you may have more chances to do that. And always remember, you need one job. You don't need 10. I know you'll be applying for a lot of jobs. Be prepared that you'll be applying for a lot of jobs, and be also prepared with a lot of rejections. And trust me, I have an inbox in my Gmail. There's a specific folder which has all the rejections. And I keep it just a reminder. And I can see this because I've gone through that.
Right.
If I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have been talking about it. I've gone through that. That's saying, just widen your search. If I hadn't taken up the public policy fellowship and thinking I just want to be a corporate lawyer, I may not be doing this podcast with you. So,
right.
Yeah.
All right. So last question, is there anything you would like to share about your journey or any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think it's been a fascinating journey, I would say. I never thought I'll be doing what I'm doing today. Lobbying, being an advocacy and government affairs person in one of the biggest countries in the world. And in India, I never thought I will be doing that. So doing this right now in US, it's pretty fascinating journey, I would say. And again, I re-emphasize for the students, just think about it. Think about widening your job search and doing things that is related to your work, but may not be the something that you had thought, like corporate law job or something, but equally rewarding. Today, I work in an organization which takes positions on advocacy issues, which I would also personally take, and I sleep well at night. So that makes my life easy.
Very true. That is very true. And well, that brings us to an end of our episode on Brief Encounters. Thank you so much. It is genuinely a heartfelt thank you to you, sir, because the experiences that you stated, that has in a way taught me and also comforted me in so many different ways. So I think it was a great experience for me as well to talk to you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here.
Thank you, Riya. And I'm glad that you all doing this, and you're doing a great job. And I mentioned it was.
Thank you so much.
Doing the interview was really, really easy, I would say, for me. So
thank you. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you found today's discussion as enlightening as I did. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and leave us a comment. And until next time, this is Riya signing off. Thank you.